Good afternoon, everyone. So I had prepped an intro, but now I don't even need to do that. So as was mentioned, I'm a first-year PhD student in Interdisciplinary Ecology within SNRE in the Theory Lab. It's players there. And in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about my past experience in pangolin research and conservation. First in Asia, in Thailand for my master's degree, and then my postgraduate work in Kenya with the Pangolin project. And a little more background. So I've been obsessed with pangolins for nearly a decade. While I was at National Geographic, I did some volunteer work with Save Vietnam's Wildlife, which was one of the first organizations to successfully rehabilitate and release back into the wild pangolins that were rescued from the illegal trade. And then during COVID, I worked with some folks out of Florida International University, analyzing footage from the first ever animal-borne camera to be placed on a pangolin. So naturally, when I began my master's at Yale, I knew I wanted to continue with pangolin research. So that's where we will start off. So some key pangolin facts to take into consideration before diving in. Pangolins are the world's only scaly mammals. Their scales are composed of keratin, so that's the same substance that's in our hair and in our fingernails. And when they are scared or being predated upon, or attempted predation, they'll roll up into a tight ball and use these scales to protect them against these natural predators. And they primarily feed on ants and termites. So globally, there are 8 species of pangolins. 4 can be found in Africa and 4 can be found in Asia. Actually, recent genetic studies on some scales taken from the illegal trade show that there may be a 9th species of Asian pangolin, but TBD. And for this presentation, we'll be focusing on the Sunda pangolin, or Manis javanica, which is located in Southeast Asia, and the giant pangolin, which is Smutsia gigantea. They're found in West Central and parts of East Africa. So why, besides the fact that I find these guys absolutely adorable, did I devote so much time to researching them? Well, unfortunately, pangolins are the most trafficked non-human mammal on Earth. And they're poorly understood. They're shy, they're nocturnal, so not a lot is known about them. So any further research on them is important for informing conservation efforts. But why are they so heavily trafficked? What is causing this demand? So pangolin scales have been used in traditional Chinese and Vietnamese medicine for many, many years. Recently, there's been a resurgence in the popularity of these medicines that are used to treat a myriad things, including poor blood circulation, blood clots, and lactation difficulties in new mothers. And so there's been an increased demand for this medication. Their meat is also consumed as a delicacy, particularly in southern China, where the interest in wild meat has been growing in recent years. And their scales, claws, and other body parts are used as good luck charms across their geographic range. So the objective for my research, which was conducted in collaboration with the Zoological Society of London in Thailand, was to understand if we could use local ecological knowledge to better understand the status and threats of pangolins around this one protected area in Thailand. And if we could, it would be great to repeat those methodologies across Thailand's protected area network, collecting sufficient data to eventually inform a national strategy for pangolin conservation, because at present, one does not exist. So there were several research questions that I was hoping to answer with this work. So first and foremost, are pangolins even present anymore in this one protected area, Gangachan National Park, which I'll show a map of shortly? And if they are, what are locals' perceptions of these populations? Are pangolins hunted in this area? And if so, is this for subsistence or for the trade? And is this hunting opportunistic or is it targeted? And finally, do local communities have any unique beliefs, attitudes, or perceptions about pangolins in the region? So I chose to use local ecological knowledge to get at these questions because it's been shown to be useful for studying cryptic species like pangolins that are harder to study using traditional ecological methods like mark recapture or transect walks, etc. It's also more cost-effective and less time-intensive than these aforementioned ecological methods, which is, of course, an important consideration in a 2-year master's study. And it can provide information on population and environmental changes over time. So this was my field site, Gangachan National Park. So it was located in southwest Thailand along the border with Myanmar. And I conducted my work in 5 different villages. One of them is located under the little screen there, and the other 4 are here. And all of these are located along the eastern border of the park within 5 kilometers of the park boundary. There are no villages located in the north, south, or western portions of the park because, as you can see, those are contiguous with other protected areas. So across these villages, we conducted 100 semi-structured interviews with 20 households in each community, with a wide demographic, men, women, all ages. And we asked questions such as, have you seen a pangolin before? How often do you see pangolins or pangolin sightings? Are you aware of any hunting in this area? Do you know about the trade? And do you even use the protected area? And then at the end, we collected some demographic data on each respondent. So when asked how often do you see pangolins or pangolin signs, 85% of respondents said that they had seen one at least once in their life, and that was the most popular answer. But a handful of respondents actually said that they had saw pangolins or pangolin signs monthly, weekly, or even daily, indicating that pangolins are still present in the area, even if it is at low numbers. We also asked where they most often see pangolins. And so the most popular responses were in agricultural land, around villages, and this other category, which I'll come back to in a moment. We also included different forest types as an option for an answer to this question, but we found that this didn't really resonate with respondents. And so what really we can get at with this question is, where are people coming in contact with pangolins? And so understandably, it makes sense that this would be in human occupied spaces such as agricultural land and near the village. Now, this other category was a free form. People could give any answer they wanted. And people almost always said along roadsides and in forest reserves. So forest reserves are a different type of protected area in Thailand that allow for multiple use. So people can go in there and collect forest products. Whereas in the protected area, you're not really supposed to do that, even though it does occur along the boundaries on occasion. Seasonality of sightings, pangolins were seen all year round, although we do see this bump in sightings during the rainy season, which is between July and October. That will become important again later, so keep that in mind. We asked people why, if you do visit the protected area, why do you do so? And our thought behind this was, if people aren't comfortable speaking about pangolins, because it is known that they're a protected species and they're hunted, it would give them another opportunity to talk about why they might visit the area and when they might come into contact with pangolins. So a few different reasons were given: recreation, firewood collection, livestock grazing, and NTFP collection. NTFPs are non-timber forest products. So in gray, we see those are respondents that said they actually don't visit the protected area. However, if they didn't, they almost always visited those forest reserves instead. Those that did visit mainly visited to collect NTFPs. The most popular NTFP that's collected are head cone mushrooms. This is a type of termite mushroom. So these grow only in and around termite mounds. And they're collected during that rainy season period, and they're extremely popular. So people come from all over the country to come purchase these mushrooms, bringing in people from far and wide. And you can see here, these are local community members, and they have their bags of termite mushrooms that they've collected. And so people will drive by and purchase them, and within a few hours each morning, they're completely cleared out. They're a huge local delicacy, and so they play an important component of the livelihoods of these communities that live around the park, because these are only collected in the 3 provinces surrounding Gangachan National Park. So if we put all these puzzle pieces together, all the answers that we're getting here, we see that, okay, people are most often coming into contact with pangolins in these forest reserves, and sometimes in the park. And it's during the rainy season when they're collecting termite mushrooms. What do pangolins feed on? Ants and termites. So it makes sense that this is when they're seeing them most frequently. And this has important management implications, because now local NGOs and park staff can develop community engagement and education strategies around these activities and around this time of year. And if needed, there could also be increased law enforcement, since with so many people coming and going from this area at that time of year, there are increased opportunities for pangolins to be trafficked out of the area. Some other interesting findings from the study were around pangolin hunting. So up at the top there, it's blocked, but it asks, were there any pangolin hunting activities in the past? And then this is correct. So this, we consider the past to be more than 5 years ago. This study was conducted in 2022, so that would have been earlier than 2017. And then the current was between 2017 and 2022. So the yellow indicates yes, blue indicates no. So we can see that hunting was present across all 5 communities, both in the past and the present, but it did decrease within the last 5 years. So we wanted to dig into this a little bit more. And here we can see, we asked them, well, in your area, when was the most recent hunting activity? So 2 to 5 years ago, so in 2017 to 2020 would have been, there was hunting across all 5 villages. But then between, after 2020 to 2022, it was only reported in 2 communities. And so we said, well, why do you think this, what was the reason for this decline? And people said there was increased law enforcement. There was a decrease in price actually paid for pangolins. And finally, that there were fewer people actually coming to communities to request pangolins to purchase. And this, when you look at that timeline, adds up because that was COVID, right? And so Thai borders were completely shut down, and even travel between provinces was very, very difficult. And so it makes sense that there were fewer people coming to request pangolins. For future work, it would be really interesting to see if this remained at low levels, or if after those COVID regulations eased, if it picked back up again. We also asked people if they felt that pangolin hunting was targeted or opportunistic, and overwhelmingly we found that it was opportunistic. People really weren't going out and searching for them that much. It was just, if we come across one, we'll collect it. And so we also asked people what they thought happened to pangolins after they were caught. So some people were aware of this international trade in pangolins. But interestingly, a lot of people also reported that pangolins were taken for local consumption. Although many people said that that has decreased in recent years with improved access to markets and improved infrastructure. But there were some people who, in the interviews, which we were very lucky, people were comfortable talking to us about this. Several people said, no, if we see one, we'll take it to eat it. And one woman even provided a recipe for pangolin curry. It was pretty spicy, she said, to take away the exotic flavor. So then the other interesting finding here was that people did reference a national trade as well. Now this would need a bit further investigation, because we don't know if this is people seeing local ties coming in and requesting pangolins that then are moved out for the international trade, or if there is indeed a national demand. So this is another point of interesting future potential research. So conservation implications of this work. So our findings will be important for informing education and community engagement efforts that are developed by the park and by NGOs like WCS, Wildlife Conservation Society, and Zoological Society of London that work in the area. I'm also hopeful that it will elevate the use of this social science research method within the scientific community, because it isn't often given a lot of clout. And finally, I hope that it can be repeated and lay the groundwork for similar studies across Thailand's protected area network to inform a larger national strategy. So now we're going to travel over to Kenya's greater Masai Mara ecosystem and look at pangolins there. So as a reminder, okay, so here's Kenya, located in East Africa. There are 2 species of pangolins found in Kenya, the Temminck's ground pangolin, which inhabits Kenya's savanna landscapes, and the giant pangolin, which is only found in the prairie forest of Kenya's greater Masai Mara ecosystem. Okay, so here's Kenya. This is where the Mara is. We have the Mara Reserve, the contiguous community conservancies, and the Mara Conservancy. And then we see there that Olololo Escarpment, And up on that escarpment is the Macquarie Forest, which is where the Pangolin project is located. So the Pangolin project team was actually initially working in the Eastern Mara, researching Timmin's ground pangolins. They're the more common species in Kenya. But in 2020, they received a photograph of a community member from Macquarie holding a giant pangolin. Now, prior to this photograph, giant pangolins had not been seen in Kenya since the 1970s, and it was a single sighting on the shores of Lake Victoria. So at this point, the scientific community just assumed they were no longer extant in Kenya. However, with this photograph, the Pangolin Project knew that this was a big finding, and they relocated to the Macquarie Forest area to conduct research on giant pangolins, which are the least studied of any pangolin species. So their primary objective is to study giant pangolins through camera traps and through tagging, understand more about their ecology to inform their conservation. They also work with local communities to educate them about what are pangolins, what do they do, ensure them that they're not harmful to crops, because sometimes communities are concerned about that. And then they are also working on securing this area for conservation. Right now, the Macquarie Forest is not protected. Deforestation is occurring rapidly, and it is the only known place that giant pangolins are to be found in Kenya. And so they're working on securing that land. Okay, so well, the dates are covered now, but this was a satellite photo of the Macquarie Forest in 1988. So we see the escarpment here. In red and yellow are 3 of the main forest blocks that Pangolin Project team is working in. And the yellow circle here shows this forest ecosystem. So if we go through over time, this was 2004. So we see between these two, right, we've lost some forests up here and back there. But then if we jump ahead to 2020, it's decimated. And we can see why really Pangolin Project is focusing on these remaining forest blocks. And so this deforestation is driven by some recent Kenyan land policies that are encouraging land privatization. So people are securing their private lands, they're fencing them off, and they're cutting down the forest because they would like to use it for pasture and for farmland. And so the communities in this area are primarily Maasai, and Maasai are pastoralists, so they have goats, sheep, cattle that they want to graze in this land. And because the land up here on the escarpment is quite fertile, a few of them have started farming as well. And here, when we zoom into the forest blocks, you can really see some of that land segmenting going on here. You see the blocks of private land. Okay, so let's see. This is some videos of the deforestation. So I was working in one specific forest block, the one in yellow, and it was a really emotional landscape to work in because you would be placing camera traps, which I'll talk about later. And in one day you go and you place the trap and it's like on the border of the forest, and you go 3 days later to change the SD cards and it's completely wiped out. So that was where we had placed the trap, and then a couple of days later it was gone. Now, the way that this system is working is that people are designated their private land, but the Maasai communities themselves are actually not doing this deforestation correctly. They will encourage folks from outside the community to come in and cut. They can live on their land, cut down the forest, and then those people will convert this timber into charcoal, and they will take it to the cities to sell, and then a small portion of that goes back to the landowner. So they're never actually getting their hands dirty in the deforestation. But unfortunately, this deforestation, here we can see one of those charcoal kilns burning. This deforestation has led to increased hunting. Maasai typically do not consume bushmeat, do not hunt, but the people who are coming in from outside do. So there's increased hunting and there's increased human-elephant conflict. This is an important area for elephants. For half the year, they use it as a calving ground and a nursery. So there's been increased instances of that conflict. Okay, so what was I doing for a pangolin project? I was responsible for conducting a camera trap survey in one of the forest blocks, the Old Kikuri survey forest block, which we would just call OFB because it's difficult to pronounce. And so the first thing that we would do is members of the team would go speak with the landowners who own the land that comprise this forest, explain to them what we're doing, what the purpose of it is, and to gain their permission to actually be on that land. And then we would set up this grid over the forest block and do a transect walk to find the burrows that were present there. So that's what one of the burrows looks like. Ideally, there would be at least one burrow in each grid block. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. So we would indicate where we found burrows, and then in the grids where there was more than one burrow, we would place the camera next to the one that we thought was the most active. And so these are members of the team setting up one of those camera traps, looking down at the burrow, and that's one of the camera traps. And because these were focused on the burrows, it gave us an interesting perspective of what biodiversity was there. Most camera traps would not just be focused on the hole in the ground. So our primary goals here were to understand, are pangolins, giant pangolins, even still using this forest block? And if so, in what way? Are they in one area? Are they spread throughout? And then we also just wanted to do a general biodiversity assessment. What is in this space still? So, excitingly, we did find that there were giant pangolins using these forest blocks. Play the video. We got 9 clips of giant pangolins. 5 of those clips were confirmed to be from one individual. His name was Saruni. And this was one that they had previously tagged with a GPS tag, and so he had a little bolt left on one of his scales, and so the team was able to identify that. And then we estimate that the remaining clips were from 1 to 2 other individuals. So we're thinking that this was 2 to 3 individual pangolins, and they used 8 different burrows. So this says on the top that there was also thriving biodiversity. In the area, we in the 1 month that the survey was conducted, we saw 32 different mammal species and 12 different bird species. And this is one of them. This is an adorable little artwork. And I included this guy here as a representative because they're the ones who actually construct these burrows. So they're incredibly important for this ecosystem. They're digging it out, and the pangolins are the ones who refine the burrows and decide which are the best to use. And then it was fascinating to see all the other species that are reliant on these burrows for denning or even for hunting. So there was one video where we saw a bird of prey sitting outside of the burrow waiting for small mammals to come out. Snakes will even use them as well, again, just to escape the heat, but then also they eat rats and things that live in the burrows. We confirmed the presence of leopards in this very fragmented forest. Leopards hadn't been seen there for quite some time, but while we were going through replacing SD cards and batteries, we were I felt very privileged that I got a lot of time walking through this landscape, and we can make a lot of really cool observations about what was going on. And one day we saw that this baby impala carcass had been dragged up into a tree, which only leopards do that. And then a few months later, actually, after I had left, from this forest block, the team had sent me this video. So there's Mom. And some teenage cubs. We've got one cub there and the second there, which is really, really exciting. So what that says up there is that pangolins will return to and use previously blocked or burned burrows. So we did encounter a few burrows that had been blocked with pieces of downed trees. Some of them had been burned. Local communities will do this because hyenas also use these burrows to raise their cubs. And the community is not a fan of hyenas because they feel that they will take their livestock. And so here we see a mother hyena and some of her members of her clan checking out one of these burrows. She looks pretty pregnant to me, so I'm guessing she's assessing it for den potential. And so we decided to unplug these burrows and just put a camera in there and see, well, is anything even going to come back to this once it's already been blocked up? And plenty of species came back, including a pangolin that used the burrow again afterwards. So that was heartening to see. We confirmed that the forest fragments are still being used as a calving ground and a nursery for elephants. So this was historically known by everyone in the area, but because the forest is so fragmented now, a lot of the conservationists working in that space were saying, there's no way they're still going to be using it. There's simply not enough space, but they are. We saw plenty of young elephants on the camera traps. This one I picked because this guy's particularly adorable, even though he's a bit older. The team even found a placenta one of the days that they were walking around. So they are giving birth here. There were so many cute baby elephant videos. Every afternoon when we would review them, it was always fun to see what we would get. We also confirmed the presence of crested guinea fowl, which before this were not proven to be in this forest, but now they are. And we did get one video, it wasn't as high quality, but with chicks, so we know they're nesting there as well. And we also got a sighting of a really elusive African palm civet. These were again thought to be in this area, but this proved it, and they're really hard to get on camera traps. So the team was thrilled about this one. There he is. And this is known by plenty of people who work with camera traps, but the wildlife do interact with these cameras. And so it's common for primates. So we had baboons and blue monkeys and red-tailed monkeys looking at the cameras and moving them around. But interestingly, the elephants also had a good time with our cameras. 2 of them were taken by the elephants, one of which we recovered. And my hypothesis for this is obviously they're very intelligent. They know what's going on, but because of this increased human-elephant conflict, there is aggression towards humans and human things. So they knew that these were placed by people, in my opinion, and they weren't too happy about it. So this camera was placed in what we deemed the elephant bedroom. It was one area of the forest fragment that they would come almost every evening to settle in and rest for a little bit. And he was not fond of the camera being in his bedroom, understandably. So he worked really hard to take it off the tree. Did this for a while. There's like a 5-minute clip that I pieced together that show now, but he eventually took it off the tree and chucked it down the hill. We did get it back, and miraculously it still worked. So big promotion for those cages around the cameras. Of course, it wasn't all just fun wildlife stuff. There were plenty of people who we saw on the cameras, as well as livestock. And the kids were particularly curious about the cameras. And then they would look at the burrow and be like, why on earth is this here? And so that just shows how much of a mixed use landscape this is, right? Like it is incredibly important for all these different species, but people are using it too, mainly to graze livestock. And so for now, what this says up there is that for now, wildlife and people are coexisting in these fragments. But as they decrease in size, I don't know how sustainable this cohabitation will be, which just further emphasizes the need to protect this area, hopefully increase the size of the forest so it can continue to be this mixed use space. And I've included this photo or this video of this genet, which is more common, but you can also hear, hopefully, yeah, you can hear the bells from livestock in the background. So this is right, I mean, this is on the edge of the forest patch, no, 12 feet away. There were goats and sheep passing by as this genet checks out the burrow. So that was the camera trap study. It was really fruitful. We found a lot of good stuff in it and confirmed that it was although it was only a 72-hectare piece of forest, it was very, very worth conserving. I was also fortunate that during my time there, I got to see 3 giant pangolins in the flesh. As I mentioned, the team members work closely with communities, educating them about pangolins, and so they encourage them to call the Pangolin Project to folks when they see a pangolin. And so this happened every time. So I was there. Over here, we have our vet Joshua inspecting this beautiful female. This was the first time the team had seen one out in the day. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock when we got this call, and it was a really overcast, rainy day. So we're thinking the cooler weather brought it out. But that was a special opportunity to get to see them really well. And when we go see these pangolins, the goal is to sex them, weigh them, measure them, and when tags are available, to tag them. So this guy, this is the same pangolin here. He was the biggest pangolin they had ever seen. He was a male. He was 6 feet long and nearly 100 pounds. So giant is the correct name for these pangolins. Here you can see them what they're trying to do is have him do his thing where he rolls up in the ball in the blanket, because then they just lift the blanket up and weigh him. And this whole process only takes usually like 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the pangolin's not happy about it. And then he's free to go about his way. And it's also a really good opportunity to further engage communities about it, because then they get to see these pangolins up close. The community is asked to name that pangolin so they have more attachment to it and connection to it, and it becomes their community pangolin. So looking forward, I am hoping to work further with the Pangolin Project team to compile the data from this survey with other camera trap surveys that they've conducted in the past and that are ongoing, so we can have a more landscape level understanding of the biodiversity that's there, the pangolins that are there, and how they're moving through the landscape. The team is also working on tagging pangolins for individual identification. This is something new. That one pangolin they were able to identify because it had the bolt on its scales left from the GPS tag. But while I was there, we were discussing using the tags that are put on like livestock ears and putting them on different scales so that way they could start to count how many pangolins were here. Right now, the estimate is about 30 to 50 in this forest ecosystem, so there really aren't many. They're also going to resume GPS tagging. They've tried a bit of that in the past. The tags really don't stay on the pangolins for more than a month because they get caught on burrows and tree branches and all these things. So they're working with the developers of the tags to try and refine the tag and hope that they can stay on a bit longer. And then, like I said, they're really trying to secure the land as a conservation space, working with local communities to do conservation leases for this area, which, because it is so fertile, is quite expensive and much more expensive than doing so in the greater Mara. And they're working with the community on de-electrifying the 3 bottom rungs of the fences. So like I said, fences are going up everywhere in this area. And unfortunately, pangolins, when they try and scoot under it, are electrocuted. They wrap themselves around the electric wires and then they die. And so they've lost several pangolins this way. And because there are so few left, it's a huge problem. So the team has been working really hard on communicating with the communities about the problem with this system and encouraging them to de-electrify those bottom rungs of their fence so they can keep it in the top and keep giraffe and elephant, hopefully, although elephants figure out the way through, and keep their farms fenced off, but without killing pangolins. And then I wanted to end with this really fun video that the team sent me a couple weeks ago. It has some cute music in the back. There's baby. So this is only the second sighting that they've had of pangolin mother and pup. So they're breeding. The pangolin population has a chance in this area. I thought it was very cute. Okay, let's keep going. And that is all. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.